Well, Mr. Butterell sure has been busy here lately. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to another video already as the Kraken re-signed Cale Fleury. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not actually kidding. They did re-sign Cale Fleury, but the reason that we're here is that Butterell has pulled off another trade already, further signaling that this is going to be a busy offseason for the Kraken, maybe even more so than the previous trade, as the Kraken, this time, sticking with trading to the Central Division, send Andre Burakovsky to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Joe Veleno. And while the last trade was much more about getting a player, getting an asset, making the team better this way, this time the trade is much more about what they're sending out the door. And look, and of course, right out of the gate here, gotta start off with saying that Burkovsky is a great guy, and I think we all wish that it would have worked out here better in Seattle, and it certainly looked like it was going to early on in the first season after the Kraken got him in free agency from Colorado. He was the leading scorer with the Kraken, I think right up until the day that he had that injury that ultimately cost him just about half of the first two seasons that he had, and that he just never really quite recovered from. I mean, that's not a stretch to say whatsoever. He just was not the same player when he came back, and sure, there were spurts here and there, occasional streaks that he would go on where he showed that talent again, but then it would disappear as fast as it came, and it just wasn't around nearly as often as the Burkovsky that just kind of disappeared in the lineup night after night. And with the guy that's getting paid $5.5 million per year, he just was not worth anywhere near what the Kraken were paying him. So for the Kraken to get the rest of that, which is still 2 more years contract, out the door and not have to give up any future assets or retain any of it, and even get a depth center in return in Joe Veleno is, I think, an absolutely fantastic trade for the Kraken. Again, hopefully it works out for Berkey in Chicago, and the fresh start can get him back to who he was in that first season with the Kraken and who he was with Colorado. I mean, he still ended up playing 177 games for the Kraken, where he had just the 30 goals and 62 assists for 92 points. And in the same 3 years with Colorado, played a somewhat similar 191 games, but 61 goals and 89 assists for 150. So obviously a significant drop off here in the few years he spent in Seattle, and definitely, again, not worth $5.5 million per year. So for the Kraken to get, even with Valeno's contract, which is just over 2.2 coming in, the Kraken still end up saving around $3.3 million of cap space for this season and $5.5 for next year. So that is a signal right away that the Kraken are far from done here in this offseason. They now have over $18 million in cap space, which is more than enough to sign both Kakko and Evans, as well as Cartier, which I'm not expecting much of a contract there, and still have a pretty decent chunk left to go and hopefully get another forward, which also sending Burkovsky out the door potentially opens up a spot on the forward end. I've got Valeno coming back, who will likely be the fourth line center if he stays on the roster. And I mean, he's not necessarily guaranteed. I think he'll have to kind of earn that spot as the year goes along. And there's always the chance that the Kraken don't intend on keeping him. He could end up getting bought out. It's a contract that with just 1 year left on it. The Kraken, I mean, similar, low risk to the 1 year contract, or 1 year left on the contract from Mason Marchment, but this time it's even less, and they can just buy it out for around about a third of what they could have bought Burakovsky's contract. So either way, they save a lot on the cap, and they also potentially make room on the forward end to make another big addition. With all that having been said, though, while I think the Kraken would have been happy to get this deal done and not even get anything in return, just send Burakovsky's contract out the door and not have to give up futures or retain any of the contract, and they do end up getting Valeno in return, and like I said, could buy him out. I think this is a player that the Kraken actually look to use and hope to have as, again, probably a fourth line center, but a part of the depth of this team, and what seems to be a clear step in the direction of becoming a more physical, tough team on the forward end. As Valeno's not going to put up many points, as we'll see, but still a 6'1", 200-pound center left shot, has spent now 5 seasons in the NHL, or part of 5 seasons anyway. Again, his first season as he came into the NHL with the Red Wings at 21. He only played the 5 games, but since then has gotten up to a career of 306 NHL games, in which he has just the 38 goals and 43 assists for 81 points, which is certainly far under what anybody was expecting from an exceptional status player when he was drafted 30th overall in the 2018 entry draft. But even still, what Valeno very clearly now at this point in his career does provide, and will definitely fit more of this role of a third but much more likely fourth line center, is a physical presence where he is not afraid and in fact seems to quite enjoy laying hit after hit after hit. He has well over 100 hits in every season he's played in the NHL. Obviously, aside from the first season where he only played the 5 games, that would be quite something to average 20 hits per game. But I got 123 the next season in 66 games, then 152 and 81, down to 108. Pretty modest 108 hits in 80 games. Then last season between the Red Wings and finishing with the Blackhawks, 139 hits in 74 games, totaling 529 hits in those 306 games. This is, again, a very physical player that the Kraken, I'm sure, will be excited to put out there on the ice to slow down some of their opponents, and especially given that they're in a division with some fast and, well, getting faster and younger forward talented groups. That is something the Kraken, especially while they're waiting for some of their young talent to hopefully develop into a similar threat, being able to slow that down for a team that looks to be a little bit more defensive under Lane Lambert is something they definitely needed on the forward end, where we just didn't see much of that physicality outside of Brandon Tanev and Yanni Gourde when he was healthy. But these are both, with Marchment and now Valeno, much bigger players and even maybe a little bit more physical than what we have seen in the past. Okay, maybe not that much more of a physical role than what we saw particularly from Tanev in his time in Seattle. He still did hit at a higher per game rate than even Valeno does. But even still, Valeno playing center can use that physicality a little bit more in a wider scoping role than Tanev could on the wing. Plus, he makes a little bit less than Tanev does. Either way, a good depth add here for the Kraken that, you know what, again, at just 2.275, if they do end up deciding that a couple of guys are ready from the farm system to come up in, a Berkeley Catton, who's not going to fit the same role by any means, but would take up another spot on the forward end, or even a Ryan Winterton or Tyson Jugnoth, then it's not like they're taking a huge hit to sit a guy like this and have him come off the bench every now and then. And considering the Kraken are an organization that does value, maybe even heavily values, advanced stats, and certainly more advanced, better stats than what we have publicly available, well, you can see where this might not be a player that they're going to commit to having as a mainstay on the starting lineup every night, as the advanced stats don't necessarily shine a great light on him. As a role player, it's not necessarily as important if he's only going to be spending 12 minutes a night out on the ice, but still, the Corsi for percentage, well under 50% every season he's been in the NHL, expected plus minus, pretty well into the negative every season. And looking at the same things we looked at with Mason Marchment, his stats from Dom Lucian, a model that I tend to like quite a bit, don't shine a particularly flattering light on his last season, where Dom has him as one of the worst offensive forwards in the entire NHL, and also not offering a ton on the defensive end either. Still, again, a fourth line depth center gives the Kraken some options, and we'll see what ends up happening here. Again, really the big part of this trade for the Kraken is getting that contract of Burkovsky's off the books. Find a way to get out of the last 2 years of that. So even if Valeno doesn't end up playing much of a role with the Kraken, they still end up saving $3.3 million on this year's cap and that $5.5 million next year, which does help them then look to either off-season ads or even potentially and hopefully adding at the deadline with that cap space. And just real quick here, while we're on the subject of cap space and ways the Kraken could use that cap space that they now have a decent chunk of here throughout the rest of the offseason, for anyone that's worried about the Kraken not having yet extended Capo Caco or Riker Evans, I haven't heard as much about Riker Evans, but some concern about the fact we haven't seen anything or heard anything about Caco. Not anything to worry about. Both of those players are RFAs, so the Kraken don't even have to have them signed by the July 1st free agency opening. They just will put in a qualifying offer for both of them and then continue to work on a deal there. I fully expect, especially with the amount of cap space they have now, that both of those deals will end up getting done. Probably also something from Cartier, unless he wants to test the free agent market. Again, Cartier, I suppose, like Valeno, not necessarily a lock to make the starting lineup. Another guy that could have to work his way into it, given how last season went. But either way, the Kraken, a decent amount of space here to now sign both Evans and Kakko, have some left. And again, there's at least one more way that the Kraken could still end up making more cap space for themselves if they were to, say, buy out a contract that they're paying $5.9 million into for another few years. Although that one, we'll see. We've heard some things that Grubauer might not actually get bought out. The team might keep him, and considering they did overhaul the entire coaching staff aside from Jess Campbell, who's coming back principally to be helping the development of the younger players, which was a big part of her role last season. But they still made changes with the goaltending coach, which personally I don't really know why they made that change. But making a change at goaltending coach does kind of signal that they're hoping another new face might get Grubauer at least to a level that he's a serviceable backup. I mean, as far as asset management is concerned, I would still like to see that contract got bought out. Even as much as we like Grubauer the person, the player has not really served to help the Kraken get to their goal of making the playoffs, aside from the one season where he did help them get there and then was fantastic in the playoffs. Either way, we'll see what happens here over the next few days as we get towards the draft, but it's pretty clear the Kraken have plenty more moves to make, as they've just made more room to potentially make another big swing and get some contracts signed. So until we hear another one of those moves come down, which, based on the pace of things right now, will probably be within 24 hours of this video going up, let me know what you think down in the comments section below about this move, what you'd like to see the Kraken do with this newfound cap space. Heck, not even for this season. You can even, if you want to look as far ahead as what the free agency window looks like next year, I guess feel free for that. And otherwise, again, I'll see you for that live stream of the draft. Until then, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.